Hello and welcome to Dark Portents. My name is Christian, and today I have a special guest with me who may be a recurring panelist on Dark Portents. It's Brendan, the Battlestag.
Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Doing good.
Today, Brendan and I are going to be talking about Deadhouse Gates. And Brendan just finished it for the first time. I've read it 3 times. It's one of, if not my favorite book of all time, kind of tied with the fourth book in the series that Brendan hasn't read yet. But we're going to be talking about that. And first, we're going to go through and talk about it in a spoiler free manner for a little while for those of you who haven't read it. And then we're going to have a spoiler chat afterwards, which we'll give full warning for. So before we get into that, I just wanted to introduce Brendan a little bit and maybe have him introduce himself a little bit. So Brendan and I met a few years ago in my hometown, at least. I'm not sure if Brendan's actually from there, but I'm from St. Pete, Florida, and we met there. And I'm not exactly certain how we met. My former hairstylist probably had something to do with it, but
Yeah.
we ended up seeing the Misfits together, not together, but not in Chicago in 2016 because Brendan and his group had like backstage something
Oh
special
man,
passes of some
that's
kind.
a story I got to tell you.
Yeah, so
It was not as glamorous as one would one would hope.
so let's I meant to wear my Riot Fest Misfits 2016 for this recording, but I didn't.
Ah,
Anyway, without further ado, Brendan, why don't you tell us a little about yourself and maybe how we ended up here talking about Malazan together and
right, yeah. Well, I think that we both ran in similar circles. I'm not from St. Pete originally, but I've lived there longest out of any place I've lived there, so it might as well be the place I'm from, basically. It's I think we probably met, like you're saying, through our mutual hairstylist, and yeah, we all ended up going up to Riot Fest, and I think hanging out for quite a bit there, and then kind of adding each other on Facebook and realizing, oh wow, you're really into fantasy stuff too, cool. And then we kind of just like went from there. Like, are you reading this? Are you reading that? Or I think, and you had mentioned that you were into Malazan, and I had said, oh yeah, I picked that up, but I couldn't get into it, or like the story that everybody has with Malazan, where it's just I picked it up and it was just like there's so much, and
yeah, myself included.
yeah, it's a lot. I'm actually thinking there might be. For someone that's great with computer programming, if somebody could figure out a Duolingo for fantasy and science fiction definitions and things, like using them conversationally and whatnot, we'd get a lot better with that, a lot faster. Dune, Malazan, etc.
Yeah. And Dune and Malazan are two that I think a lot of people bounce off of, especially like their first time trying it if they don't
Yeah.
necessarily have the right expectations, or have, more accurately, if they
I,
bring the wrong expectations to either of those
right.
series.
I do find it's a lot about mindset when it comes to them. Like, you almost have to like experience them first, and then you have to realize you have to be ready for them in a way, And then like, I mean, I just now like finished reading the original 6 Dune books, and I started reading them like 20 years ago, you know. So I mean, like even within the series, you'll find like certain books will bounce off of you, like you say, and then like you'll come back to them and realize, oh man, I just didn't get it at that time or whatever.
Yeah, and I'm not sure about Dune. I've only read the first 2 Dune novels so far, but at least in terms of Malazan, Erickson has said that he, growing up, the books he loved to read the most were the ones where, every time you read it, you get something different out of it, and the ones that are like really designed to be reread.
Right. Right.
And so he tried to make a fantasy series that would have that kind of would feel that way for readers.
Yeah.
He wrote the kind of
Sure.
fantasy he wanted to read, essentially. And you know, I haven't finished the series. You know, you're going through the first time, and so am I. Although I've read Deadhouse Gates 3 times, I the first few times tried to go through the series, I stopped either in Deadhouse Gates or right after, or in Memories of Ice. Um, so I don't know for certain, but everybody who's finished this series tells me that there's something he's doing with these 10 books where no matter what, when you get to the end, it's going to cast a whole light back through all 10 that you're going to have to, you know, eventually go back, like it sort of recontextualizes everything. And when you go back through, it's going to, you know, it's going to make more sense. So I'll have to take their word for it because I don't know. I don't know what that means, you know, but yeah. So you I guess I convinced you, or you were convinced by somebody to give Gardens of the Moon another try. And
you know, it was honestly, it was your enthusiasm for the book series that convinced me to give it another go, because you know, I had read quite a few, you know, fantasy books at this point in time. And you know, for some reason it just wasn't like, it wasn't really, I didn't really relate to any of the characters, it felt like. And you know, there were some other things that you know, like those main criticisms that, you know, people have of it. You know, but you know, I stuck with it, and for whatever reason, you know, I, you know, I started reading Deadhouse Gates. It really, I don't know, resonated with me in a major way. You know, just everything just really kind of came together in a way for me that it didn't with Gardens. And it makes me really want to go back and read Gardens and see like maybe what I'm missing. And it's like, maybe like, is it just that like I understand a little bit more of the world and the language and you know, and that sort of thing, like the structure, it makes more sense to me, you know, so it's a little bit more easy to go through. You know, I wonder if that's sort of what's going on there. Like I'm more fluent now in Malazan than I was then, you know,
and
sort of
and
a
it
thing.
it's a Gardens. I mean, I'm not necessarily telling you to stop Memories of Ice and go back to Gardens. You can just come back to Gardens once you finish book 10 if you want to.
Right,
But
right.
as somebody who's read Gardens 4 times, uh, the third and fourth time were the much more rewarding. Like this, the first time I think I failed to finish it, and the second time I finished it, but it was still like hazy and like kind of like you're like treading water almost, you know, trying to get through it. And then the third time I was like, what was my problem with this again? It's so great. I love these characters. And I get it, you know. And I think that part of that can be, you know, it can just be your mindset and your expectations. But I know for me, a big thing was like having people to like chat about the books with, and like you know, referencing the PowerPoint occasionally, and things like that. So yeah, I guess let's get into, you know, Deadhouse Gates a little bit. What was it that, spoiler free, and we can come back to anything and spoilers. If there's something you really want to say about something we talked about here, just bring it back up again in spoilers. But spoiler free, what was it about this book that you think really grabbed you and really pulled you into the Malazan world and kind of made you want to pick up Memories of Ice and
you know, I felt like I don't know what it, you know, and again, this is why I want to go back to Gardens again, because I feel like maybe I overlooked something in, you know, and then now like reading this one, I you know, came across it, was the just the way that I felt like basically transported to, where we are in, where we started that origin point in the very beginning. Its name is escaping me right at this very moment. The very beginning, the prologue. I
The
feel
prologue is in
transported.
Unta, in the capital city.
Punta. Thank you. Yeah, you feel transported. You feel like you're in with everybody, in with the crowds and everything like that. It's a very, it felt like he has such a great vibe. He gets such a great vibe for civilization, or gives such a great vibe for civilization, I should say. It's incredible. That's one of the other things that I really enjoyed about it too, is that whole idea of civilization being built on top of civilization that he does throughout the series, and both, through the whole
Right.
series, really.
Yeah, yeah.
The running
There's a lot
thing.
of ruins and like cities built on top of the ruins of previous cities, and deserts that used to be oceans with like the ruins of
Yeah, and
ocean
then like
faring
the time scale.
civilizations. Yeah, there's a lot of and we can go into maybe a little bit more of that in the spoilers if we want to, because there's certain details that would be pretty spoilerific if we got into,
Yeah. Don't want to do
but
that.
in general,
Yeah,
uh
trying to be very general here.
yeah,
Uh,
in general, you have this like super kind of archaeologically and anthropologically inspired approach to world building, where it feels like it's not just a world that's lived in, but it's a world like that has been lived in, and
right.
in ways that kind of feel, that kind of have a verisimilitude. Is that how you say that? Uh, I think where it feels real.
Sounded
I don't
right.
know.
Yeah, it reminded me. I saw this news article the other day. They were repairing a road in Great Britain, and so they had, dig stuff up with a backhoe. They came across a section of Hadrian's Wall that they hadn't realized basically existed. The funny thing is that somebody had to discover it prior to that, because they built on top of it. So somebody was like, "Oh, let's not tell anybody about this, priceless archaeological discovery here, or else they're going to make us stop building the road."
Oh wow.
Yeah,
That's wild. So what,
progress stops for no one.
right? Another theme that you will discover that Eric
Sure.
deals
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
in,
Progress is a big theme, isn't it? Throughout the technological advances and the weaponry, and and all that stuff. Very cool.
yeah. So what else really sucked you into going from kind of a skeptic to being a fan of the series with this one? Is there anything else
Um,
that kind of
I
stands
well,
out to
I would say, like, for this one, like, I
you?
really loved the characters. I don't know, like, I didn't feel like I loved the characters as much in Gardens of the Moon, and I feel like I look back and I go, okay, well, I really did like that character. Okay, that character was really great too. Okay, well, that character is cool. So I do really like the Gardens of the Moon characters, but there's something about the way that everything happens in Deadhouse that you just, like I said, I felt like I was there. I felt like I was part of the group, you know,
Right.
and I thought that was great, and I felt that, I guess, a little bit more. So I mean, I guess that would be my thing, is like, it's a bit like, okay, it is a really large series, so, and he does a lot of different stuff throughout it, different styles and techniques and things. And so if you didn't like this one, keep going, and even like you were saying, it's like, you may not even want to use that as an entry point. You don't even have to if you don't want to.
No,
Uh,
that's true.
uh,
I'm somebody who believes that so first of all, I'm glad that I started with Gardens of the Moon, and I'm
Same.
glad that I'm going through the Book of the Fallen as the first thing I'm going through all the way, and kind of like, only branching out of the Book of the Fallen to at points where it wouldn't spoil anything for the Book of the Fallen. But for different readers, I could see an argument for starting with the novellas, or starting with Ian C. Esselmont's series, at least the
Yeah,
first book for sure.
sure.
I mean, maybe not the rest of it. I'm not sure because I haven't read it yet. Or the Ian C. Esselmon's prequel trilogy, not Erickson's prequel trilogy. I've been warned that's like so spoilery that you just can't. But
That's exciting.
there's a few different points you could enter. You could enter, I feel, and be
Yeah,
done.
yeah, and that's really cool. Um, some of the other, uh, like this is, and not to be, I don't want to get into spoiler territory, but without spoiling anything, I love like the little nods to other authors that may have influenced them in their gaming, and in their, and in their writing, and just like the stuff they've read coming through a little bit here and there. And if you read some of that stuff, I'm sure there's a bunch of stuff that I didn't even notice that maybe like, came across. But I love the way that I see my favorite little things from other places incorporated in really subtle and fun ways that are very original and like don't feel copied. They do feel like homages, like Esselmont says in his discussion with AP Canavan.
Yeah, yeah. Even the even the stuff that is, more or less copied, there is enough of a twist put on it that
Very
it
much.
doesn't feel like just kind of cheap plagiarism, and just feels like kind of like picking up
Very
those
much.
ideas and doing something different with them. And I think the very most obvious example uh is the Black Company. Have you ever read those novels by Glenn Cook?
I have them on my shelf hidden. They're on the. I think they're in here. They're on the second part here, but they're on. They're in my my Warren there.
Okay.
Book Warren.
So have you read them?
I haven't. I haven't.
Okay.
Um,
So the mercenaries that the first, at least first couple books, I haven't finished the series yet, revolve around, they all have these cheeky, soldiers humor based nicknames that they go
okay.
by. So the archivist of the Black Company is this guy named Croker, and he's the narrator through the entire first book and through many parts of the sequels as well. And then you have people like One Eye and Goblin, and
That's
you
great.
kind of get where I'm going with this. The
Yeah.
Malazan army, while they're not just a bunch of mercenaries, they have like the imperial structure, and like they're in a proper military.
There we go.
Yep, there you go. They have this naming convention that's very obviously an homage to Glenn Cook's series.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Which
But I
that is
feel like,
really fun. I
yeah,
think I mentioned that to you in one we were talking the other day, where I love the way that it names people and places. Like it's all very genuine feeling.
yeah, 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 and I like the way that in Malazan a lot of characters will end up, especially characters that live for a very long time, but not only, will end up with multiple different names that they might get, like, one that they're given at birth, maybe one that they got from being a soldier, one that they get from hanging out with this crowd, or one that they
Sure,
get for doing this thing.
sure.
It's true to life, I feel.
It is, yeah. It's true to life, and it's really true to like kind of the traditions of fantasy and mythological storytelling. Um, like Tolkien, had a character named Turin Turambar that had, I think 5 different names in the story. Uh, so, like that's one of those things that's like classic, but at the same time, Erickson does his own thing with it, and it makes it refreshing and new, and also at the same time, it feels very realistic because it's like I'm known by many names. Like you hear that, like
Right,
so many places.
right. Um, so let's see. What else do we want to talk about before we get into spoilers?
Oh, let's see, what else can we talk about? Um, I had a really dumb joke because I think of really dumb jokes, so I'm gonna avoid that one. One of the things that I noticed, and I don't know if this is okay. If this is spoiler, can we edit it out? I don't mean to spoil anything.
Sure.
Just okay. Uh, One of the things that I've noticed is that it seems like Erickson kind of does this thing where he'll like start you off with like this kind of he shows you this demonstration of like imperial power and brutality. In Gardens, we saw what was it that mouse quarter, the burning of that area, like in the
Yeah, yeah,
beginning.
yeah.
I think that's where Tattersail, blah blah blah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
There, we have that, and then again we have another scene that shows something similar in Deadhouse. Again, and then later on in each book, he kind of shows you something from the other side that can be kind of construed as brutal and oppressive. And that's kind of an interesting thing about
Well,
that. It really
yeah.
makes you question, like about the use of force and the use of violence, and the lengths that people will go. And
Not only that,
great.
but I feel that particularly, I mean, I don't know, I can't speak to the burning of the mouse quarter, but in terms of the prologue of this book, and we can get into more details about this in the spoiler section, but I'll just say real quick, in the prologue of this book, they do show something incredibly repressive happening, and the ramifications of that violent and oppressive act sort of carry through uh, really the whole book for certain
Mm-hmm.
characters. But I think from different characters' perspectives later on in this book, you see things about the society that of the Malazan Empire that could arguably justify uh, the
Yeah,
actions taken in the prologue. And I don't want to. We can get into
yeah,
the nitty
but
gritty of that in
yeah,
a little
I
bit.
have
But
another question about the prologue actually, and about like Malazan policy, I guess we'd say, but Malazan foreign policy, we'll say.
sure.
Yeah. Once we can get into that a little bit more. Um, but yeah, I thought that was very interesting. Like he never asks you to kind of choose between two sides. He just shows you two sides, and that's kind of a thing that is great. Something I love. I'm always a big fan of that sort of gray area. Like authors that do that sort of thing. Like I often feel like that whole these guys are the good guys, these guys are the bad guys. It's so overly simple, and yeah,
Right, right.
you
There's
know,
there's very few, I think, clear bad guys in Malazan. There are not zero of them, I don't think, or unless there's something redeeming about some of the characters I'm thinking of when I say that comes way later. I don't think there's zero, but you know, it's not. It's usually not super clear cut, or even when it
mm-hmm.
is, like there will be sort of a clear cut bad guy in maybe Gardens of the Moon, where in Memories of Ice you might get to see, well, that guy might be clearly bad, but it doesn't mean the people putting putting themselves against that guy are necessarily good, that kind of thing. Like it shows you the other side of, like uh if not the character itself, like the side that they're on, quote unquote, and kind of
Right.
shows how like their entire side may not be all good or all bad, or the side opposing them may be committing
Sure,
atrocities as well, as well, whatever, so there's
sure.
a lot of like, even when there is a clear bad guy, uh it it doesn't just leave it there. It still kind of like pushes and pulls around it, with more complexity.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I feel like I'm like trying to dance all the way, which is something actually that's very that people complain about with the way that characters talk to each other in Malazan, that we're doing right now, trying to do a spoiler free section. is you're trying to like dance around uh, something, and characters in Malazan will often talk to each other with a set of either baseline assumptions that they're not saying, but that are sort of implicit in their conversation and therefore
Sure.
not explicitly stated to the reader in their conversation, or something that they don't dare say, and they'll kind of talk all the way around it, and you have to figure out what's in the negative space
Right.
based on what they're saying. And,
Right.
and while people will complain like, oh, it's so hard, they do this, I don't know what they're talking about, we just did that a couple of times trying to
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
as much
It
content in the spoiler free section as we could.
you remember we were having a conversation about gardens the other, or I think a few months ago, and I said, I don't know if you ever heard this quote, but from Dune, God made Arrakis to train the faithful. Erickson made Malazan to train better readers. Like that's how
Right.
I kind of feel about it. Is like I felt like I was getting better at kind of reading these things and kind of accepting. It's like, okay, I don't have to know everything right now. Like you don't have to know everything right now.
But even and that's true, and that is something you need to accept with Malazan. But if you
Mhm.
read really, really closely, you can pick up a lot of things
Yes.
that on a more casual read, it might take you till like halfway through the book or into the next book to figure out.
Or like the
Uh,
third reread,
sure,
it depends.
the Duke and Duchess podcast is doing a read of at least the first three books, I believe, right now. And their episodes come out fairly slowly because it's just like a husband and a wife doing it like whenever they can, and they have kids and everything else. But they do like 2 to 4 chapters at a time,
Okay.
and they read it like 4 times before they record. Uh,
Sure.
so, and one of them's never read the books, and the other one has read at least the book they're on, if not like the whole 10 books. And they pick up a lot of stuff that it took me a lot longer because they're reading it. They were reading it once casually and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
back through 3 more times to
Right.
take notes for the episode and ask questions and speculate and all the rest of it. So by the time you get the finished product, which is they sit down for 2 hours and talk about 2 chapters for that long,
Yeah.
they'll get a lot of things that it takes me way longer. I mean, they'll also get a lot of things wrong too, but you can get a lot out of the book if you want to read it that closely, or you
Absolutely.
can just wait for it to
Absolutely.
come around on the reread. So
Yeah. I really love something like this, because a book like this, because it is so rich. Like the words that he uses are so specifically chosen. Like every sentence is structured a certain way. Every word chosen specifically, and I really love that about it, because like you can pick out like, oh, he used that word for that, and that means this here, and you can kind of get these like little hints of foreshadowing, and stuff, just from the language people choose to use. And I love
right.
that. I love that.
I also like the thing that his choice of perspective is always really well
Yeah.
thought out, and communicating and not communicating exactly what he wants to the reader, both explicitly and implicitly, by his choice of not only what character to put the camera through their eyes, but what characters not to put the camera through their eyes. And just also you get such a rich uh, tapestry of character perspectives. In this book we have one character who's an imperial historian going along
Yes.
on this military campaign. So you get the military campaign from a very different sort of viewpoint, and attached to a very different set of
Mm-hmm.
assumptions and biases than if
Yeah.
it was like the general, or a
Sure.
frontline soldier, or there's a couple other things I could mention there, but kind of spoilery, so we can
Yeah. Yeah. Right. This
back
is
on
this
it.
is another one that's going to require a lot of dancing. I don't want to get too specific there. Um, but yeah, no, definitely one of my favorite characters in the book. in Deadhouse. Is that historian. Um,
Yeah.
and like that's I love the military aspect of the series as well. Like I feel like he does that particularly well and takes a lot of care to understand the different, like I don't know what would you say, like military or martial styles of the different cultures. They're
Oh
all
yeah.
very different. It's very,
Yeah. And the way
very,
that they
very
like dynamically interact with each other in this book in particular, there's some interesting examples that I can try to remember. I didn't reread it before this discussion, but I have like a vague idea. Maybe in the spoiler section, I can remember. You can help me. Uh,
I will do my best.
so, um, I mean, I feel like there's always more to be said, especially with a book this rich.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
eventually we're gonna have to get into spoilers. So I guess just real quick, do you have any last thoughts before we jump into the spoiler section on this?
I like I said before, even if you didn't particularly like, or if somebody watching didn't particularly like Gardens of the Moon, they should give this one a shot. Because it is it felt different to me in a lot of ways. And I again I want to do a reread on Gardens because it makes me feel like there are things that maybe I was overlooking for some reason or another. I like I said, I probably read the first Dune book 5 times, and I just now read the second one for the third time, and I really loved it. And so like sometimes it's like that. You don't pick up on the thing that you like or the thing that you love the first time through.
It does feel different, and not only that, as somebody who's now on the fifth book, I'll say as well that none of these books, I mean, there's obviously like some commonality in how the books feel because you have the same author.
Yeah,
He
sure,
has he has a voice that is distinctly Erickson, but
right,
each of these books has like their own tone. Even the ones that are set on the same continent have a different like feel and a different structure, and maybe some themes in
yeah,
common, but not necessarily the same, like beat for beat the same themes. Each book really does feel unique, which is great. I love that. And he's not the only author that I've seen do this, but in really long epic fantasy series, it's good to have like a little bit of variation to where each book has its own
oh
distinct
yeah,
feel, and you don't get sort of worn out treading
sure.
the same sort of formula every time. So yeah, I'm with you there. But once you've read a little farther, I think you'll agree that none of them really feel the same. Like
And I think that
overall.
that is a strength of the series, I would say.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. And I agree with you. All right, so I guess if you're good, we can move on to spoiler
Yes,
talk.
I am ready to spoil some things.
All right. So if you haven't read the book, shut this off now. Go read the book. Come back. We are going full spoilers for Deadhouse Gates. Where do you want to start, Brendan?
Um, Well, let's start right at the like right at the beginning. I'd like to get a little more specific on that whole idea of that like that beginning of imperial brutality, like that beginning prologue scene there, just really sets a tone, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, it sets the tone that this book is going to be more uh, brutal, for lack of a better word,
Sure.
than the first book. That it's going to be maybe more unforgiving in some ways in terms of the way of what the characters have to go through. Um, but it also sets up some things which will be subverted, because and it
Yeah.
plays with, I think, your assumptions coming out of Gardens of the Moon, because in Gardens of the Moon, while you follow, and I think we can spoil Gardens and Deadhouse Gates, because if you've read
Yeah.
Deadhouse
I
Gates, you
mean,
probably
yeah.
read Gardens of the Moon. In Gardens of the Moon, you follow, while you do follow several characters who are on the Imperial side of the conflict. You follow, the bridge burners and Ganos Paran, and you follow Adject Lorne, and you follow Tattersail for a while till she blows up. and you follow. I'm trying to think. Talk the Younger, I think, for a little bit there as well. Maybe, or maybe that's just through Lauren and Perrin's eyes. Anyway, you follow quite a few Imperial perspectives, and you like the Imperial characters that you're with their viewpoint for the most part, even if you probably end up being frustrated with or pissed off at Tashrin, possibly Hairlock, things like that. But for the most part, you're kind of cheering for these soldiers that you follow, and even for Lorne to an extent.
Right.
But you also get, at least for me, I came away with a pretty anti-imperial sort of stance in Gardens of the Moon, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
there's vague mentions of the benefits of the Malazan Empire, I think, but it doesn't really, Gardens of the Moon doesn't really show us much of the benefits of imperial rule, and it doesn't really show
Right.
us anything that makes Lucine, the Empress, a very sympathetic character. I know I'm going on for a while. I'll get to
No,
my point and let
totally
you
fine.
talk for a little bit, but
Go for it.
so you have these assumptions when you come into the prologue of Deadhouse Gates about the Empire, and those assumptions are validated, seemingly, by the
Right.
prologue, because you have
Right.
this brutal purge of the imperial nobility, as well as characters who clearly aren't part of the imperial nobility, that are just like maybe on
Okay.
Lucine shit list, and
Right.
they unleash the mob against the nobles as they're on the way to these ships that are going to take them to these mines where they're going to be slaves and mine workers. And so, it's not a very favorable view of Lucine or the Empire, right?
Right.
But then gradually you begin first through Coltane, I think, at the council with Duiker in chapter 2, I believe. And then, as the book goes on, you're gradually introduced to this like sort of opposing viewpoint that wasn't really there before.
Right.
Which sort of, I think, one of the big culminations that cast doubt on the outrage you will feel against Lucine in the prologue is the way that the nobles behave in the chain of dogs, right?
Sure.
Because they really show you how like corrupt. And there's other examples too, like there's that guy that was about to kill his commanding officer because the guy was like beating his wife, who was the guy's sister. And there's other examples of like sort of the nobility, and there's like Pormqual, and other
Right.
examples of the nobility kind of being this like infestation of the Malazan imperial command structure that are like
Yeah.
a deliberate obstacle to like people surviving and people
Yes.
living, things like that.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a long point. I'll let
No,
you
that,
go ahead.
no, it was great. I loved it. One of the things that I was curious about, and I don't know, maybe you could shed some light on this, is that so when we're talking about when we're in Unta, are we talking about an imperial colony of the Malazan Empire, or are
Unta
we
is the
talking,
capital of the empire.
this is the capital of the empire? Okay,
Yeah.
so yeah, yeah. So these are literally imperial nobles. So these are actually parts. Yeah. It's it's kind of it's kind of it's an interesting way, and like you're saying, it doesn't cast Lucine in a great light. It doesn't cast the whole thing in a great light. But then, like you're saying, like you have characters throughout, like they're saying, like this is why we do what we do. Like there's reasons. Like you haven't seen what it's like when there is no empire, basically. You
Right.
know,
Yeah, there's that too.
uh, like and kind of I think that like when we see who Corballo Dom, like when they're trying to escape, with like Coltane's trying to lead the refugees to escape, those forces, those rebel forces, Shike's forces. You really see some of like the cruelty, uh, that the other side can, it's like, okay, well, yeah, it's like maybe
Well,
the Empire is trying
interestingly,
to keep people honest, and that this is the reason they do what they do, or you
Right.
start to get that kind of a vibe. Whereas like in Gardens, it's more like I don't care much for empires. Uh,
Right. Though interestingly, the most brutal and efficient action by the rebels was, as you mentioned, from Corporal Odam, who was an Imperial fist before he joined the Whirlwind.
right.
So you
So he
you
learned it somewhere.
right. So it's not it's not Corporal Adam's maybe an example of sort of a nuance there that
Interesting.
he
Yeah, that is.
he learned that
I
he
hadn't
learned
thought
how to
about that.
rule, but from the
I,
Malazans.
I feel like I have a poor remembrance of the scene in particular, but there's a scene where some undead are called to do battle, and then like you see kind of a continuation of things. I think that's a better illustration of the point I was trying to make. But
Yeah,
I was trying to go for a different one.
so the Warlocks under Coltane, the Wiccan Warlocks, basically bring these corpses or spirits out of the sort of place where they're like kind of lingering around and haunting and haven't really passed through Hood's Gate all the way or whatever. And they're the warriors, the undead warriors, kind of fight for the chain of dogs, so to help like them sort of escape with less casualties. And but then the other spirits that were brought back were these mothers that are killing their children, stabbing them over and over again. That was their final moments were stabbing their children and stabbing themselves. And the historian kind of is like, why is this happening? And I forget who he's talking to. I think it was one of the warlocks, and the warlock basically says, well, if they didn't do this, then their cousins who they were fighting after they won, that's what would have been done to them. So it's like showing that there's this like sort of like cyclical violence, like that it is like almost transcends historical specificity, I suppose. And I feel like I had and that's encapsulated in this concept that a lot of people it's probably one of like the most quoted parts of this book is the phrase "children are dying." Do you remember how this phrase was used in the book, like what the concept was?
I'm not sure if I remember specifically from the book, but I feel like I understand the concept from other places that I've heard that. I'm not sure exactly specifically where that is, but it's like,
honestly,
dying.
Maybe it's because after being sort of like paying attention to politics for as long as I have before I read these books, and being like sort of brought around to anti-war politics because of seeing of children being killed in warfare. It didn't really resonate with me as much either, but I know a lot of readers are like, oh, children are dying, and it's a big thing. But basically, Duiker is talking to, I believe, Corporal List, and List says, you can forget about your history textbooks. I'll save you the paper. Just write the phrase "children are dying," and that sums it all up. I mean, I'm sure it was more powerful the way they worded it, but that was the basics of it, and it's kind of like echoed a few times after that, like throughout at least the chapter, if not the book, and it kind of keeps coming back to it. And in this case, I think they were talking about the refugees, because a lot of the refugees were Malazan civilians that Coltane had to evacuate. Yep, that's the word. To Aran.
Speaking of Duiker, I noticed this little spot where it was said that he's trained by Tok the Elder alongside Tok the Younger. Now, isn't Tok the Younger, is he like just nominally a claw? So it's just like, I'm a claw, but it's more like I got like the secret handshake. It's whatever.
So he was
a legit, because I mean, Duiker's kind of a badass. Like, I feel like people don't really bring that up as much, but he holds his own in quite a few situations there.
Right. Well, because Duiker was a soldier
Right.
before he was trained as a historian, he was a soldier who thinks, and that's what Kellenvet wanted. So
Right.
Kellenvet had Talk the Elder train him to be a historian because he wanted an imperial historian, and he didn't know how to read, and he had like 6 months or something uh, before he really began his training with Talk to learn how to read, and he just like got thrown into it basically.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so the Talk the Younger, I don't know much about Talk the Elder, but Talk the Younger, it was a scout for the Second Army, I believe, in Gardens of the Moon. And if I get the numbers of the armies wrong, you'll just have to yell at me in the comments,
Yeah,
viewers.
I'm sure somebody will know.
But and he was also an trained by, like, he was somehow an Imperial Claw. Like, I don't think he was an assassin mage like like most of the proper Claw are, but he worked for the Claw much in the same way. I don't think Lauren was an assassin mage, but she, I think, was like technically under the purview of the Claw as well. But really, in the end, in the dinner scene in Gardens of the Moon, not to get too back into Gardens of the Moon, we can have another video on that.
Right.
I believe Talk basically shows his loyalty to the Second instead of the Claw by not calling out Tattersail's lies in the dinner scene, if I'm remembering that correctly. And Lorne knew that Tattersail was lying and that he didn't call her out. So there's
right.
So really he wasn't a Claw in the end. Like, once he disappears in that portal in Gardens of the Moon, I don't think he was a Claw at that point. I mean, maybe like on paper, but like in terms of like where his loyalties lie, I think that he was
it's like
a soldier of the Second.
It's like in a movie where like the cop is like, okay, you're in the FBI for this weekend while we're solving this murder, and like he gets an upgrade or something, kind of like that, I guess. I don't know. I thought that was kind of interesting how they were educated at the same time.
Nice little callback to a character that, at the point that you're reading, you're hoping that Talk the Younger might somehow not be dead.
Sure. You never can tell.
Right.
with a series like this, which is part of the fun.
Yeah. There's a lot of ways to not die in Malazan.
Yeah. Yes. And just as many, if not more, ways to die. One of the things that I wanted to talk about was Pyrrhic Victory, the idea of Pyrrhic Victory, because a lot of the videos, they talk about, the way that Coltane, he makes it just to the gates, and Pormqual won't open the gates and let his men out to go fight to help bring them in. And that was just like a heartbreaking scene. Absolutely heartbreaking. I feel like there was like it felt like somebody said something, and I don't know if it was intentional, but it felt like one of the videos I watched over like the time, like I've been watching a lot of videos of this stuff because, you just get obsessed.
Yeah.
But yeah, they kind of were like Coltane like failed, and he failed to get through the gates of Erin, but he prevented Corballo Dom, like he like stymied them for so long. He just let them batter him for so long that like Corballo Dom's forces are not going to have nearly as much energy to attack Erin by the time they get there and through. And I mean, it was a brutal scene to behold. But like if Pormqual had been a more intelligent commander and leader, things probably would not have gone the way that they did for him and the people around him. In a lot of ways, I think that Coltane was victorious, and it was a Pyrrhic victory. So. He lost his life. He lost a lot of lives, in the pursuit of his goal, but he did in fact achieve it. Despite people like Pormqual and some of the nobles doing their best to
Sure.
screw it up for him. And
But he did achieve it, and it's not his fault that things went as badly as they did. I think that it's but I will say that if it would have been a total defeat if it weren't for Kalam.
Yeah.
And do you know why?
Go for it.
I don't know if you caught this because it probably took me till the third time to catch this. So the reason why the city guard of Aaron stayed behind when Parmqual and Malik Rel led the Marines to their deaths was because one of the rebels that Kalam talked to before he ended up killing them said that their shaved knuckle in the hole, the rebel shaved knuckle in the hole, was the Gistal priest, which is Malik Rel. And so the guy that was with Kalam, the Malazan refugee, he was a captain of the, I forget, he was like a captain in the Malazan military structure somewhere. And by the time the Chain of Dogs reaches Aran, he was in Aran as a captain in the city watch or the city guard. And they were ordered by either Rel or Pormqual to join the march out to attack Corbilodam's forces, to walk into the trap. And somebody said the word Gistal priest about Malik Rel or to Malik Rel or something. And that triggered in the mind of this soldier that would not have been there if Kalam hadn't escorted him to Aran through the Imperial Warren, that phrase of him being the rebel, shaved knuckle in the hole. And so he kept the guard back and closed the gates. And without that action, they would have marched with the Marines into the trap, been disarmed, crucified on the road to Aaron, and the city would have been taken by Corbolodam's forces, and the Malazan navy, the ships led by Adjunct Tavore, would have approached a hostile, occupied Aran instead of
that would not have been good
to land safely.
Right.
So the whole ending, kind of hinged like the Coltane's.
That was great. Yeah,
Coltane having a Pyrrhic victory. I'm not trying to take away any credit from Coltane, by the way. Heroic.
No. I mean, like
awesome what he did.
That really because you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right with that. I mean, I don't think it diminishes what he accomplished at all, because he got the refugees there. That was the goal he was trying to accomplish. Wasn't necessarily to like save Aaron.
But the refugees in this situation would have all been slaughtered.
They would have.
So that would have
Can I also just like a little bit of nerdery on top of the existing nerdery we were already nerding about? The Corbolodam's forces used this classic the feigned retreat, the Mongol feigned retreat, that is like just like a classic move of the Khans that they used to do. Is like, oh no, they're too bad, we're running away, you're too scary, and then they'd run them to this like valley. They make them think that like, oh man, we're gonna corner them in this valley. They'd all climb up the valley and they'd flank them, and that's exactly what they did in the book. And I loved that he incorporated that whole thing, because that's one of those things that I always thought was really interesting, was the tactics of the Mongols. Really fearsome warriors, So,
and in this case, it was very obvious that's what they were doing to everyone but Pormqual.
Yes, yeah.
So and maybe like, the nobles, right?
Taking the bridle and everything off his horse and going, the horse doesn't deserve what's about to happen to him.
Yeah, right. But I think really probably most of the Marines under Pormqual's command knew what was happening, and
I think so too.
They followed orders. And sadly, they, a lot of times, obviously, like if you don't follow the chain of command in a military situation, the military can't function, and following the chain of command is what's gonna save all your lives. But in this case, the opposite, the Malazan discipline tied to an incompetent commander led all of these soldiers to kind of like eyes wide open, walk right into the trap, which is just so tragic. And you get you get a couple of things to drive home the tragedy. You get the but also to relieve it and to answer it. And one of the things that drives it home is Duiker's last moments, where he's communing with the spirit of the Jaghoot. Is it the male Jaghoot or is it the mother? I forget.
I can't recall offhand either.
Well, it's like the last thing he sees before he dies is the face of this Jaghoot he's communing with, and like their kind of shared grief. And then there's something after that where there's kind of like a mixture of answer with driving it home, and that's that you get the servants of the alchemist Baruch show up. These Bokarala demons show up to remove who they think is Coltane, but it's Duiker, from the crucifix to go back to have him resurrected. And they're like, oh, we got to take the body, not just the soul, because humans are really particular about their bodies. And and so that's kind of the answer, because you get a little bit of comic relief, and it's like at least Duiker's not gonna stay dead. But you also get this, so it's very bittersweet, because you get the slip of paper with the Marine that he had his dalliances with, and that he formed this connection with, and that he was sleeping with. She didn't tell him her name, and she wrote it on a piece of paper, and she wanted him to read it before the end, and he never did. And the name is like read out by like one of the demons, and they don't know what it means, of course, and they just drop it on the ground. And so there's that. But then the other moment that really is the real answer within this book, at least, to all of this horrific tragedy, is the moment where Mappo and Ikariam are on the road to Arin, and they see all those crucifixes, and the Marines who had gone through the Solanda sequence, and who had like taken the wounded Wiccans to Arin in the Solanda, they're there on like a wagon, and they have the two dogs from the chain of dogs wounded in their wagon. And Mappo is moved by how much this Marine, I think it's Truth, I think he's the young one, cares for these dogs, even though they're gonna die no matter what. And he gives them his last healing potion to give to the dogs, instead of using it for a human or for Ikariam or for himself. That's the gesture, this tiny gesture of humanity. I mean, Mappo Trell's not human, but humanity, compassion, to relieve this gigantic tragedy. It
reminds me of I can't remember whether it's like who made these rules of like fiction or horror, but it's like you're not supposed to kill kids and you're not supposed to kill dogs. And so like someone like Stephen King, one of the first things they want to do is they want to kill kids and dogs. And spoiler alert for this, some kids die in the series. Some get brought back though. Right. There is and now they got to get taken care of by somebody. So that's but I thought that was kind of a thing. That was a funny thing where it's like okay, I'm not going to kill dogs, guys. All right, I'm not that bad.
Well, and so many characters tried to kill Roach, which is like this little Chihuahua dog.
Like
nipping and
a little rat dog who becomes the leader of the cattle dogs.
Right.
Love that. As the owner of a tiny dog myself.
Characters kept trying to like throw stuff at it and kick it.
Yeah,
and
like somebody threw a spear at him at one point, I think.
Yeah.
Like,
and they just got mangled by Corporal Dom's I forget what his tribe's called, but Corporal Dom's forces, and so Mappo has this moment where he
man, like that whole like the Mappo in Icarium, they are just like they're like the Frodo and Sam of the book in a way to me. I don't know if that makes sense. I mean, not in a very vague and general way. There's not a lot of perfect overlapping analogies.
In the way that Mappo is like kind of the most solid like follower, I guess. Like Sam, is that kind of what you're getting at?
Mission, like his mission of he like stayed true to that like as much as he possibly could, and then like he kind of, I mean, even at the end, he realized his mission was kind of BS, I think, and then he's like true to his friend. He didn't think he had a friend, and he was like, I realize he's like my best friend, like, right, and this seems like total crap. So
well, he's still sort of following his mission because he's trying to keep Icarium forgetful and keep things safe, but he doesn't like follow through all the way because he knows they want him to be fed to the Azath, and he doesn't do it.
Right.
So
like he could have ended his mission.
And just done whatever he wants, right?
Yeah, he could have, but instead he wants to keep Icarium alive and protect him from himself and everybody else from him. It's interesting. It's like it's a weird kind of a situation. It's really cool. And really fun to read.
Yeah, and you get some playing around with like, if you did a bunch of horrible things, would you ever want to remember it? With both Icarium and Apsalar.
I mean,
in Icarium, he did those things, but he can't remember it. And Apsalar can remember those things, and she didn't do them. Right. But, I mean, she's done them since then, right? But like, originally.
Right.
So it's an interesting dynamic there of the questions about like memory and, and culpability, I guess. And
that's a thing. That's really a thing. Like, like in Gardens of the Moon, like the dinner scene. Talk about that because it's such a pivotal scene for a lot of like characters, and but like that is like a recurring thing is forgiveness. Even through like some of the worst things that people can do to each other. There can be forgiveness, or there can be, at least people coming to terms with things, the grief they've experienced and things like that.
Right. Yeah. Though arguably in the dinner scene, it's not about forgiveness as much as it is like, well, everybody's just following orders, so you just have to ignore it. And like, you're not allowed to have feelings because you're a tool of the Empire. So
there is that.
It's
suck it up.
Right.
I guess more like I guess I misspoke there. In a way, for Tattersail to maintain her own sanity, though, she has to kind of forgive herself and like work all of that that she did do it. She did do it, and so like she has to, deal with that, the grief in its own way of having done something so horrendous. And I think like some characters are able to kind of put that aside and go, I did that because it was more important for the Empire, or it was more important for my cause that this happened. Yes, many innocent people died, but it was more important that it happened because now something much less, something much worse won't happen, or something like that. Like there's always that kind of justification.
And speaking of justifications and council scenes, not necessarily a dinner scene, but there is a council scene in chapter 2 of Deadhouse Gates.
Yes.
where Duiker and Culp, I think, seem to believe, as many other characters before them in the series in Gardens of the Moon have believed, that Lysine is taking out all of the old guard who were loyal to Kellanved and, basically getting rid of any threats to her rule that might come from those who are loyal to the memory of Kellanved. And Duiker and Bolt have a different view. They argue that maybe somebody is making all of Lysine's closest friends disappear, and I know I asked you at the time of chapter 2, and you did not believe Colton's version of the story at the time, but since then you've got to witness a little conversation with Lysine, and also did you notice that you also met one of the supposedly killed off old guard?
Right. I don't know that I did notice that.
The captain of the ship
Oh,
was Carthron Crust,
okay.
who was supposed to have he was governing Aran, and both he and his brother disappeared and supposedly drowned in Aran Bay, and they were both fantastic swimmers. So
Right. Okay.
that was part of that council scene, and there's a quite a few hints to the fact that the captain is Carthron Crust, but I don't feel like I'm spoiling this for you, because at one point one of the crew people literally goes Carthara, and he's like, "Don't call me that."
No, not at all. It's, again, this is one of those things where it's like, this is the fun of rereading. Actually, that's what I love. It's like, I found that, I found it, I saw it.
Right.
I love that.
I did realize that was Cartheron, or thought I did, but I actually did miss the part where they literally say his name. Like in all 3 rereads, somebody had to point that out to me, even though I'd already figured out that it was him. Because of other comments he makes. Like he makes a point, I think, about at some point when he's like drunk and rambling and they're in that weird warren where time is stretched out. He kind of like says something about like, "Oh, I was supposed to have drowned," or blah blah blah. Like there's other hints.
I do remember. Yeah, I remember that.
But I still have never yet read this actual line where the sailor says, "Oh, Carthara," and he says, "No, don't call me that." I still have missed that. I've not caught that
yet. No,
somebody else had to say, "Hey, it's right here." You can stop guessing because it's literally right here, right? So I feel your pain of missing a lot of this stuff, because I didn't.
It's totally fine though, because I mean, like I said, like Dune, there's like literally, I mean, there's entire scenes that I feel like I overlook or I miss, and I'm like, when I go back through, I read it again, and I'm like, whoa, like this is insane, this is so crazy, this is so cool. And that's like literally the scene with the I'm forgetting the name, it has a really cool name, the giant centipede monster.
The Dinrabi, yeah.
Yeah, the Dinrabi. Yeah, that scene, man, like that is just crazy. Just like action packed right there, so fun.
And then you get a sort of rehash of that when they start coming into Tremolor, like there's like a bunch of them. And,
oh man, that was crazy.
And
and
Fiddler throws the conch at the.
Yeah, that was that scene. That's one I almost feel like I got to reread, because there's so much happening. Like, and then there's so many different soul taken coming in, the divers coming through, and then like the actual Azeth house is like coming alive. Do I understand that right?
Yeah, the Azeth house is like taking them all down, like it took out Raced.
Right, and it can like imprison them.
Yeah.
Awesome stuff.
Yeah. Well, because the point of an Azeth house is to, well, that I know of so far. I mean, they're kind of mysterious, but like, as I understand it from these first 2 books, the point of the Azeth houses are to be a check on unchecked power. So,
okay.
So
I get it.
Big powerful things like Icarium or the Soul Taken and divers that are trying to best the Path of Hands, the Azeth takes them and stops them from being able to be
Ascend.
unchecked power in the world, right? And that's kind of like what they do. Is they're kind of like a regulatory mechanism on power in the world. um I mean, I don't really know that much more than that, or like why they might choose like to make one powerful creature like Gothos into a guardian of the Azath instead of eating him, or whatever. But that's kind of their purpose.
Or
And
the
and
wormhole maybe.
Iskarl Pust deliberately fed all of the soul taken and divers to the Azath by changing the like sign markers on the trail of the Path of Hands to point at Trimmerlore instead of at um, the temple.
Gotcha.
Because the actual gate that the Path of Hands is supposed to lead to was beneath the temple that Pust is occupying. So he probably we can presume under Shadow Throne's direction, or I can presume at least, led all of these soul taken and divers and basically fed them to the Azath house, and he tried to feed Akarium to it as well, I think.
Yeah.
And that was supposed to happen. And we find out that that the reason Trimmerlore is there in the first place is because Akarium went apeshit here and shattered this warren, hundreds of years ago that he doesn't remember. And the Azath house like came about to like stop this warren, this like piece of a shattered warren, from being too out of control and causing trouble basically. So
yeah,
there's a lot there.
yeah, and and I think it's interesting. Like you bring up the idea of like the check on power. It does seem like there's a lot of ways that there are checks on power throughout the series. That is like a thing that comes up. I don't not to bring up anything in Memories of Ice, but I think that old beginning parts of that are all about kind of that whole thing, and the whole idea of like Coltane being able to ascend,
Yes,
by way of what happens to him. It's like it just happens. Like it just happens like a natural event almost.
And the way that was revealed was when he punched Gessler or Stormy. Who did he punch? He punched one of the Marines who had gone through the like fiery
fire warren
and got their skin all bronzed, and like somebody was like, "Oh, they're on the verge of ascendancy," but Coltane just broke that guy's face, and that's kind of how you get told that Coltane's ascending is him punching the guy, because he it was bad enough that he broke his hand, but it was also bad enough that the ascending guy gets his nose broken or whatever.
Yeah,
so that's kind of like the way the power levels are displayed to the reader is through this scene where Coltane punches one of these soon to be ascendants in the face.
And the the significance of the the black cloud coming, and they're like, it's flies. They think it's flies, and then it gets closer, and then it's crows, and like these crows are trying to descend to take his soul. And it's such a large amount of crows. It's like a giant black cloud of them. That's how many have come to take his soul away. Like not 11. Like
Sormo.
Like Sormo. Like just a murderous murder of crows. It's really cool.
So, we should probably, there's so much to talk about. We could probably do a whole nother video on Deadhouse Gates.
You could literally do probably 24 videos. You could do a 2-hour video.
Honestly, I wouldn't mind if you wanted to pick out a favorite scene sometime and just spend like 10 or 20 minutes on that. That'd be fine. Great, yeah. But we should probably wrap up soon. But I sort of like danced around asking you what you felt about Lysine and the Empire after this book, and then we got distracted. So maybe we could end on whether Deadhouse Gates has changed your opinion of the Malazan Empire of Lysine, and how you felt when Kalam decided to abandon his quest to assassinate the Empress.
I feel like it's funny because I have sort of an ambivalent sort of an opinion of the whole idea of empire personally. I think we were talking about this before, where it's like that scene in Monty Python's The Life of Brian, where it's like, what did the Roman Empire ever do for you? Well, I can walk the streets at night now, and there's roads, and they did that post office thing. That's pretty good. Like all these things that come along with empire that are significant improvements over what may or may not have existed there before. There is that argument for empire. That being said, there are also a lot of things that are problematic about empires. Like, you have one person in charge of millions of people,
at least in the structure of the Malazan Empire. Sure.
Right.
In an empire with an actual empress or emperor. Yes.
Right. And something's going to get lost in the mix there. I feel like, and I feel like there's probably been a lot of that. There's been sort of like a thing where, maybe Lysine said, I need you to go do this. And they were like, okay, keep this city safe. And they just do something absolutely horrible because they're keeping the city safe, And then she's like, not like that.
Right. They have maybe a more, even if you're not necessarily 100% behind the sort of structure of power of the Malazan Empire, do you maybe have a more sympathetic view of Lysine as a character trying to function in that position? Yeah. I mean, if not, that's fine. I'm not trying to lead you to an answer.
I try to like kind of, I guess I'm trying to play both sides, aren't I? Really, I'm eager to learn more about the situation. I don't really have strong opinions of Lysine as it stands currently. I feel like I said, I feel like it's I don't have great opinions of people that assume to take so much power for themselves, though. I'll say that, if that makes sense. Anybody that says, like, let me take the One Ring, I can use it for good, that hardly ever ends well.
Sure. Yeah, sure. So I know I said we would wrap up after that, but I did want to kind of maybe get at one little more thing, and then I can ask you if you have anything you want. I mean, eventually we do have to stop, right? But real quick, were you frustrated by the ending at all? Because I feel like for people who read this and expect a more traditional fantasy structure, who maybe haven't quite realized what Erikson is doing yet from Gardens, you have like Deadhouse Gates is very much about quests and the like quest structure of a fantasy novel or fantasy novels. But in each case, where you expect the quest to go and how you expect the quest to end, even if Erikson is telling you all along that is not how it's going to work, like with the chain of dogs, they're saying at every point through that chain of dogs that they're gonna die, that it's not going to happen. You kind of expect that you're just going to hear that, and then at the end there will be a happy resolution. Or with Kalam, you expect he's going to go take out the big bad Empress, and that's what he's going to do. And there's all of these quests in this book, and none of them really go where they traditionally would go. Were you frustrated by that, and how do you feel about that?
I don't think that so I always love my expectations to be subverted, but when they aren't subverted well, that's when I get bummed, and I feel like in this series my expectations are subverted very well. The things that I don't expect to happen all the time, or like maybe it's the thing that I hoped would happen out of the options that I had kind of come up with in the scenarios in my mind. It's some of the more favorable options that I'll come up with. Like, I didn't really expect that Kalam would actually get in like a fight with Lysine. I didn't expect it to happen. I was like, 50-50 he's gonna die. Like he's gonna die in an alley. Like that's how this kind of thing could go for him, you know.
And it very well could have gone that way.
He did not. I mean, it wasn't going well for him there for a bit at that scene. You know, he got stabbed, thrown into the water. He's got covered, you know, and he's like in his full armor and everything. And then he comes out after dropping all of his stuff. He just has like pants on basically, and he's got to go and, you know, like what is Marv saying? Sin City, he's got his mitts. Like that's Kalam in that scene, and he still goes for it, which is pretty. I admire that. I love that about any character. You know, that kind of drive is really fun to read. But yeah, I didn't really expect him to actually encounter Lucine. I mean, I expected kind of maybe a scene like we got where, you know, she's speaking through a corpse or, you know, that sort of thing. But I fully expected because, you know, and this is who I'm reading. I'm reading Stephen Erickson. I know that he's going to do something to mess with me, you know, like getting away.
The first time I read this, I was in no way cognizant of the kind of author that Erickson was, and I was so frustrated with the ending. Like every single quest being frustrated. I mean, I love it now that I see what he's doing, and I realize, and I've read maybe more fantasy that does subvert expectations, but I was not ready the first time. So you're in a much healthier place than I was at.
I mean, did you read A Song of Ice and Fire? I can't remember whether you had.
Yeah, I've read everything once.
What's that?
I've read it all once.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, after I read that, I was like, man, there are some people that'll do some crazy stuff with fantasy. And then I remember somebody going, oh, you like that? You should definitely read this. And that's how I found out about Malazan, actually. And if anything, he does a lot more. You know, I mean, it's much different than like Game of Thrones or Song of Ice and Fire is much more straightforward of a fantasy series than this is in a lot of ways. But yeah, like it's still like that whole thing where like anybody could die. It could be a horrible, gruesome death. It could be a scene where like you think like, oh, they'll get out of it, and they don't. You know,
right.
And so like reading that kind of thing got me like kind of prepared for this kind of thing, I guess. And it just, I don't know, I just love it. It's like spicy food.
All right. I don't really know exactly what time we started, but I know we've probably gone on longer than an hour, which we probably weren't supposed to do. But did you have anything else you wanted to bring up as a closing sort of remarks before we close the video out?
Not especially. I'm excited to see where the series goes. I know this one picks up in book 4, I believe, more closely. I mean, he has, you know, things overlap, you know, from book to book, but you know, yeah. So I'm excited to see where things pick up with some of these characters on maybe this continent or how do we this theater. See what's going on in this theater and.
Right. Book 4 is where we resume the story of this theater, but you will see some things from this book fleshed out more, or some characters maybe you'll get a few scenes with a couple characters maybe in Memories of Ice, but but in terms of the location, the setting, the theater, if we're talking in like World War II, like American theater, African theater, etc.
Yeah.
The Seven Cities Theater is resumed in House of Chains, which is book 4.
Yeah.
So enjoy your time in the Jennabacan Theater and Memories of Ice, and feel free to come back on to discuss any of the books you're reading, either stuff that we've both read. You can come back on for that, or if you want to do your own stuff, we can put it up on the channel. I'll have you on for Gardens of the Moon or Memories of Ice, however you want to do it. So
very cool. Well, I appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. I thank you for having me. Hopefully we can do a few more of these.
Awesome. All right. Well, this has been Dark Portents with new panelist Brendan the Battlestag, and we are that wraps up our Deadhouse Gates spoiler talk. See ya.
Bye.